I'm going to play my land for turn and go ahead.
All right. I'm gonna play a Golgari Signet.
Not on my watch. Pact to negation that.
Aw, man. Okay. Guess it's your turn then.
Okay. I'm going to untap, upkeep, and before I draw, I'm going to slam this overloaded Psychonic Rift.
But what about your pact negation? I think you lose. Hello everybody, welcome back to Chain of Commander. This is Chain, your Commander-in-Chief, here today to help you with something that, I'll be honest here, I'm just as guilty of doing. And that is missing triggers. People miss out on so much of their deck's potential just because they forget their triggers. And it could prove to be deadly sometimes when you forget something like needing to pay for your packs. Because of this, I decided to make this video here today to offer some basic tips and tricks and just general good practices you can incorporate into your gameplay that will help minimize missed triggers going forward. Now, before we get into it, I do ask, if you think this video ends up being helpful, definitely consider subscribing below. I'd love to have you folks joining us going forward. And while you're down there, if you liked it, hit that like button. I would appreciate it greatly. Now, with that said, I'm going to flip this camera around and give you a little bit of insight into my little desk over here. So here we have a board state you might see at your standard FNM. In this case, this is a Tuvasa the Sunlit deck because Enchantress decks love their triggers. Now, there are a couple things right off the bat we can do with this board state to make our trigger remembering process significantly easier on us. As of right now, I have a Tuvasa up here, I have an Argothian Enchantress down here, Aristic City, everything's just all over the place. No. Clean up your board state here. Keep things tidy. Keep things that are similar effects together. So here we have Starfield of Nyx, which triggers at my upkeep, and Sylvan Library, which triggers at the beginning of my draw step. Both of these things trigger at the start of my turn. Let's keep them together over here. And then we have Heuristic Studies and Smothering Tide. These are both things that tax my opponents for doing things. So these are things I'd want to keep together, maybe over here. Keep them together so that you can have them together. And then these are my Enchantresses. They all trigger when I draw a card. Keep them together right over here. So by keeping my board together, I'm less likely to miss something because it's just hidden in the mist of my table. I can see everything clearly. I can find everything easily. And much more likely that I'll remember to do an effect when I know that my card is right there in front of me. Next, it is just an imperatively good practice to get into slowing down, taking a deep breath, and being methodical through your turn. Announcing every action, every step, and every phase as you go through it. So, it's the beginning of my turn. Untap. Nobody has priority during untapping. Upkeep. Oh, my Starfield of Nyx triggers at an upkeep. I can resolve that. I can bring back this Evolutionary Leap. Very cool. Draw. Oh, hey, my Sylvan Library triggers at draw. I can resolve that trigger. Alright, that wasn't that great, but there we go. I go through my first main phase. If I had a main phase trigger, it would occur here. I'm going to combat. Combat triggers. They now are fresh in my mind as things that would be going off at that point. Announce your way through your turn. Be clear, concise. Announce your actions. I've got over 9 cards in hand, or over 7 cards in hand. I need to move to discard. That's an important one because nobody has priority after discarding. Discarding is the very last thing you do per turn. So when you say, I need to move to discard, that means anybody who has things they want to do at their end step or anything that triggers at the end step needs to occur there. Now, there's also 3 subset of triggers, and each of them have their own little quirks and ways that I kind of recommend you can use to remember them. First, there are the things that trigger at specific times. Those would be things like the Starfield of Nyx and the Sylvan Library. They occur at the same time, every turn. For things like that, especially these upkeeps and things that occur before your draw step, a simple token on top of the deck can serve as a reminder to perform those triggers when it's their time to occur. There have been plenty of times where I have a Sylvan Library out, but I completely forget that I get to draw the extra cards. By putting a token on top of the deck, you have a physical reminder here, some barrier you have to get through before you can even progress with the game that will remind you. Sylvan Library trigger. Okay, move the token out of the way, perform the trigger. Separately, a little tip with these little die here. They don't need to be used just for triggers. They can also be used as a reminder of things you want to do at your previous opponent's end step. If they don't say go to discard and they just say something like pass turn, and you look down and see that die, that you might see that die as a reminder is like, oh, I wanted to cast this Enlightened Tutor. And then you can perform that action at their end step before going to your turn. The next type of triggers, these are things that occur as a result of actions you are doing. So these would be things like these enchantresses here. They trigger when I cast an enchantment. These tend to be the easier triggers to remember because they are a result of your own action. So you know the action's coming. You should hopefully be familiar enough with your deck that you can remember to perform the triggers that are in it. So in this case, I got my triggers there. And let's say I want to cast a Utopia Sprawl. I am announcing I am casting a Utopia Sprawl. That will trigger my enchantresses. Because of our previous board tidying up, they are all here together. So I only really need to remember one to remember them all. I look over here, Tuvasa triggers, Mason Enchantress triggers, Argothian Enchantress triggers, bang, 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 trigger, trigger, trigger. A, you make sure all your triggers get in. B, it feels really good when you start going down the line of 5 or 6 enchantresses going trigger, 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 trigger. Or you have effects that all trigger on landfall and you play a land and you're like trigger, 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 trigger. It's a lot of the fun of Magic for me. I don't know about you guys. Let me know below if that's something that you enjoy or if I'm just crazy. And the last type of thing that occurs, and these are admittedly, to me, the hardest ones to keep track of. MTG Mudsta has this Dice of Shame, and everybody has been like, oh, I forgot my bajillion heuristic study triggers, because these are triggers that occur at what your opponents are doing. And that involves paying attention to the game. And sometimes your focus is on the game, but it's not on your own cards. You're paying attention to what your opponent's doing, trying to figure out strategy, trying to plan ahead, stuff like that, which makes remembering something as innocuous as a heuristic study trigger a tad bit difficult. I have what I believe is a pretty solid solution to this. Take your finger and touch the card. Keep your finger on that card over the course of the turns. Even when you're getting super into the turn, you have a physical connection to the card, a physical reminder for your triggers. So when somebody says, I cast something, if your finger's on this card, you'd be significantly more apt to remember that trigger. Now, you might still miss one here or there, but as you practice and get better, slowly it'll become more and more ingrained in habit. I even recommend, if they do it, instead of trying to remember the words first, get in the habit of doing a quicker action, a simple tap of the card before announcing it. So say my opponent casts their own heuristic study, I'll be like, hey, you want to pay the 1 for that? Same thing with Smothering Tithe. Now, Smothering Tithe is a little bit easier because draw steps occur at the same time for everybody's turn, so that one's the easy one to catch. But sometimes they pop another surprise draw here or there. Gotta remember it. Same thing. Keep your fingers on the cards. Tap them. Even if it's just tapping both of them at the same time, you look down and be like, this is the one that triggered. Are you going to pay? Are you going to pay the 2 for that? So, like I said, pretty simple stuff. Very simple practices you can start incorporating into your game. Things that I still do. I'm like a pretty veteran player. I've been playing 5 or 6 years. These are all things I still do. I still do the die. I still do the tapping. I still do boom, boom, boom. All stuff you can do to really get into the habit. Ultimately, it's about getting into the habit. It'll take time, especially the more you got to remember, but the more you can commit to muscle memory, the more you can commit to habit, the easier it is remembering triggers going forward. So, let's flip everything back around. Let's close this video up. So, those were some basic practices that I think that all of you can incorporate into your gameplay to help minimize those missed triggers going forward. At this point, I definitely want to hear from you folks. If you have any tips or tricks that you folks utilize to remember your own triggers, definitely let us know in the comments below. The more ideas we can get in here, the more things that we might be able to find to work for you. Not everybody thinks the same way I do. Not everybody responds to the same things I do. So if there is something that I do that won't work for you, maybe somebody else has a better idea. Share below. It will only help us going forward. Also, don't forget about our month of Spoop giveaway. We have a subjective reality deck that I am giving away to one of you subscribers. Check out the video in the description below with details for that giveaway. And beyond that, it's been a crazy couple of weeks for EDH. I thank all of you for being in this community. You guys don't understand how much it means to me and how welcomed I felt after starting this channel. And you're all just amazing people. I love all of you. I love Magic. I love everything it's done for me. I hope it does the same for you. And this channel feels like my way to kind of say thanks and give back to the community. I just had to get that off my chest. I love you all so much. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you all again in the future.